Hi, my name is Ben, and I'd like to talk to you today about one of my favorite books, Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Now, if you're into graphic novels at all, the name's probably familiar. Neil Gaiman is the author of the Sandman series. And although this book isn't a sequel, it shares a lot of the same themes about magic and identity. So let's jump in. Neverwhere, again, is the story of Richard Mayhew. Richard's a young guy in his mid-20s with a full-time job and a fiancée that he's convinced himself he loves. One day, when walking down the street with his fiancée, Richard runs across a girl who's lying bleeding on the street, and he stops to help her. This one act of compassion turns Richard's life upside down. By helping her, Richard gets dragged into a world called London Below, which is kind of like a mirror of our own world, only much darker and stranger. In London Below, Richard realizes he's become an unperson. People in his old life no longer recognize him. Bank machines don't work, taxis don't stop. Richard no longer exists in the outside world, and so he travels through the world of London Below trying to find out how to get his old life back. He has to face the strangest things, fallen angels, talking rats, vampires. He has to go through a lot to try to find his way back home. He's joined in the journey by a girl named Dor. Dor is born in London Below, so she's a lot more familiar with how things work down there. But she's also young. Her age isn't specified, but she's probably in her mid-teens. And she's trying to find out who killed her family. And so Richard joins Dora on their journey together through London Below. It's an excellent story. It's full of magic and a little romance, a little fantasy. It's got a little bit of everything. So to give you a taste, let's give a quick read. Jessica. He could not believe she was simply ignoring the figure at their feet. What? She was not pleased to be jerked out of her reverie. Look! He pointed to the sidewalk. The person was face down and enveloped in bulky clothes. Jessica took his arm and tugged him toward her. Oh, I see. If you pay them any attention, Richard, they'll walk all over you. They all have homes, really. Once she's slept it off, I'm sure she'll be fine. She? Richard looked down. It was a girl. Jessica continued. Now, I've told Mr. Stockton that way. Richard was down on one knee. Richard, what are you doing? She isn't drunk, said Richard. She's hurt. He looked at his fingertips. She's bleeding. Jessica looked down at him, nervous and puzzled. We're going to be late, she pointed out. She's hurt. Jessica looked back at the girl on the sidewalk. Priorities. Richard had no priorities. Richard, we're going to be late. Someone else will be along. Someone else will help her. The girl's face was crusted with dirt, and her clothes were wet with blood. She's hurt, he said simply. There was an expression on his face that Jessica hadn't seen before. Richard, she warned, and then she relented a little and offered a compromise. Dial 999 and call an ambulance then, quickly now. Suddenly the girl's eyes opened, white and wide, in a face that was little more than a smudge of dust and blood. Not a hospital, please. They'll find me. Take me somewhere safe, please. Her voice was weak. You're bleeding, said Richard. He looked to see where she had come from, but the wall was blank and brick and unbroken. He looked back to her still form and asked, Why not a hospital? Help me, the girl whispered, and her eyes closed. Again he asked her, Why don't you want to go to a hospital? This time there was no answer at all. When you call the ambulance, said Jessica, don't give your name. You might have to make a statement or something, and then we'd be late. Richard, where are you going? Richard had picked the girl up, cradling her in his arms. She was surprisingly light. I'm taking her back to my place, Jess. I can't just leave her. Tell Mr. Stockton I'm really sorry, but it was an emergency. I'm sure he'll understand. Richard Oliver Mayhew, said Jessica coldly. You put that girl down and come back here this minute, or this engagement is at an end as of now. I'm warning you. Richard felt the sticky warmth of blood soaking into his shirt. Sometimes, he realized, there's nothing you can do. He walked away, leaving behind Jessica, who stood there on the sidewalk, her eyes stung with tears. So, hopefully that's a little bit of a hook to pull you in. Neverwhere, excellent story. I highly recommend checking it out. So,